The day begins like any other day. Your daughter soaks a second diaper, chortles as she shoves her soft-cooked egg to the floor. Knees pressed to cracked linoleum, you barely notice as your husband strokes your belly. Mijo, he croons, prophetic plea, then squeezes your nalgas as if to gauge for ripeness. As he edges past, you notice how his blue shirt blurs against the summer sky, how sky absorbs his patch of blue, then empties. Moments later, a truck groans, moves on, carting rumblings of men headed for the fields. Years later, you tell your son and daughter of that anguished day, how green card migrants vanished from the camps. You tell your children how news gripped the camps of trains headed south, loaded with wetbacks. You never tell your children what you can't forget, how you failed to squeeze back, failed to wave goodbye, failed to taunt him with viejo sinvergüenza. You never tell your children how you forget this one man's voice. A voice that brushed your ears, your hair, a path down your back, a voice that blends with the sounds of a truck that never brought him home. Operation Wetback, 1953, is one of those poems that is directly tied to a historical event in the United States, and that was the Repatriation Act, in which undocumented aliens were corralled and then sent back to Mexico. But one of the things that happened was that it was just all Mexicans, not just the undocumented ones. There was no distinction made. The poem is spoken through the point of view of a woman, a soon-to-be mother. And it was important to have the perspective because it shows that it affected that deeply, right? It affected that personally. So it really moves beyond the statistics. It moves beyond the headlines and gives a very specific narrative story so that people can begin to understand the immediate effects of this atrocity. She's now sort of confronted with this memory. So when do you tell the story of your repatriation, of your deportation to your children? How do you express that? Is part of the conversation here. You know, what is permissible and how do you shield your children from the truth? And is that something you want to do, right? So it's interesting because the poem itself is revealing, right? Is revealing. The fictional character decides not to reveal, decides to protect her children. But the poem itself is being very open about it, very explicit about what happened. So that, again, a conversation of like, what are the stories that we want to give to our children, and what are the stories that are full of pain that are difficult to tell our children? So towards the end, the speaker, the woman of the poem, mentions a voice that brushed your ears, your hair, a path down your back, a voice that blends with the sound of a truck that never brought him home. Now, this is two interesting readings of that moment. One is that there is a memory of this man who was responsible for corralling, for shuttling, people onto the trucks and then toward the trains of deportation. But there's also a suggestion there that this was a sort of almost like a sexual assault, a personal violation. And I think that that's important for why this is a female voice telling the story. This is so personal. It felt like a sexual assault. It's about both remembering and forgetting. Because there are certain things that, trauma is difficult to forget, even though we don't want to remember it, right? So that's one of those things. And the other thing, too, is how important it is to remember even the negative things that happened to our ancestors, because forgetting is a type of erasure of that experience. And also, it's important to acknowledge that how far we've moved forward, how far we've healed. The threat of deportation is very real. Growing up in a household where half of our family was undocumented, there was always that danger, right? We were not supposed to tell people. We're not supposed to let strangers into our home. We couldn't even bring our friends into the home because we had no idea what they would say about who we were in the household. And then one very interesting thing that we did, we always had underneath our pillows, we had a small bag of documents, money, in case somebody came in the middle of the night and raided the house. Because you didn't want to be deported with nothing on you. So everybody always had like this little treasure bag or treasure folder of things that you always carried with you in case you were deported.